Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're well. It's Rabbi Akiva Males, and today is Wednesday. It is the 11th of October. We're getting ready for Parshas Bereishis, and this is something none of us expected. I think I don't need to introduce today by talking about world events. None of us thought this is where we would be today, as just within at the beginning of the week, before we know it, a week ago, we were getting ready for Yom Tov. We were still enjoying Chol HaMoed. We were looking forward to the beautiful last days of Sukkot. And then, unfortunately, world events happened as they did, and Israel was mercilessly attacked by brutal terrorists, and terrible, terrible number of casualties, terrible number of injured, wounded, abused victims of brutality that they were so proud of. Just think this goes back to the day of Genghis Khan, just some of what you're reading and some of what you're hearing, but they were proud of this and put it out there for the world to see. Hashem should send us some good news soon. He should look after all of our brothers and sisters in Israel. He should allow Israel and the brave soldiers who are trying to protect Am Yisrael to be able to do their best to accomplish what needs to be done and to rid the world of this evil that exists, and to bring them all home safely, both the soldiers who are out there as well as the hostages who can't even imagine what they're going through and what their families are going through. God should return everyone home safely. I wanted to share something today. It's not necessarily linked to Parshas Bereishis, but nonetheless, it's very relevant. I was just trying to think about what could we possibly say that would be relevant to what we're experiencing. And when I was looking up something the other day, I chanced upon something from Rabbi Reisman, Rabbi Yisrael Reisman. We mentioned him often. He's a wonderful, wonderful person, an incredible Talmud Chacham. He's one of the Roshei Yeshiva and Yeshiva Torah Vodaas in Brooklyn, as well as a Rabbi of the Shul, the Agudas Yisrael of Madison, that's in Brooklyn and in Flatbush as well. And is someone that I enjoy his Divrei Torah a lot. I try to stay in touch with, and I write to him often. He always writes back, very friendly, and with a lot of care and concern. I chanced upon something, a transcript from remarks that he shared 14 years ago, 2009, and I had to look up what was going on in January of 2009. And when I looked it up last night, I was so surprised. In December of 2008, going into January of 2009, there was an incredible amount of fighting that was going on with Gaza. That may have been the first major incursion that Israel made into Gaza since returning it to the Palestinians after the disengagement. There was an incredible amount of rockets that they had been launching into southern Israel, and Israel said, enough, we're not going to take this anymore, and they went in. I believe the operation was called Cast Lead, and that was in the end of December, beginning of January 2009. It went on for 3 weeks. If there's anything that just reminds us how this problem just, we can't go on anymore, it's the very fact that I'm looking at this and it was almost like Groundhog Day, that here it is 14 years ago, and Bnei Yisrael, Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people are on the edge of their seats, chewing our fingernails and all white-knuckled because of fighting that's going on, sending so many young men down towards Gaza to go in and to fight and try to root out this evil. And here it is 14 years later, and it seems like it's not only has the situation not improved, it's only gotten worse. So if anyone needs any kind of reminder about just how awful this situation is and how we're in need of a permanent fix and not just Band-Aids, it's the fact that what we're about to share now was something that Rabbi Reisman shared 14 years ago when something similar was taking place. I want to read to you, we'll read together. I cut and paste most of the transcript just for the interest of time. Everything he said was great. But again, just to remember, this was not a written essay. Written essays, people edit and they make sure that everything is written properly and they could choose better words. This was something that was spoken off the cuff. So it's important to remember that as we read that, this is a transcript. This was not a written essay. And again, if there's a mistake, it might be from the person who was in the audience and taking notes. I want to share with you, because you'll see as we just read the beginning, you'll see that there's something here that I found very, very valuable. So let's just jump right in. So he's speaking, it was Matzei Shabbos, it was Saturday night, January 3rd, 2009. So he says, today Klal Yisrael finds itself in the matzah, the situation of danger, matzah sakana, of incredible danger in Eretz Yisrael, and once again at war. Now he's talking about the soldiers. This is such an important point. He's saying about all these soldiers, you see these videos coming out about all these people all decked up in their army uniforms with weaponry and artillery. He says it's important that we don't lose sight of who they are. They are Yiddish Kinderlach. Don't think just because they wear army fatigues and have big tanks behind them that they're Rambo or something. They are soft, kind Jewish youngsters who are being pressed into an environment they don't want, and we don't want them to be in. Once again, in a tremendous sakana. That's just such an important point to keep in mind. We see pictures, and it's important to remember we're dealing with teenagers. These are mostly 19, 20 years old, and the reservists, even them who have been called in, they're in their 20s and 30s. These are young men who have been called into action. And just because they've got this weaponry, this isn't something out of the movies. These aren't action heroes. These are young, soft, kind Jewish kids who don't want to be in this situation, but they're compelled to be there to defend Am Yisrael. And we, concerned as we are, our lives go on. Everything around us looks the same as it did yesterday, the same as it did last week. I find this shocking just when I was reading this, just to think, yeah, each and every one of us in the Jewish community, we're walking around somber and we feel a cloud over our heads because we all have brothers, sisters, relatives. We have people in Israel and we all have extended family members who are feeling this in one way or another, whether they've been called up, whether they've been serving in Nebuch, there are people out there, family members who are being held hostage. It's terrible. And we're all walking around with a cloud and in a gloom. And the world around us, at least here in Chutz La'aretz, the world around us, everything is going on as normal. We have so many friends in the non-Jewish world, and we hear the support that we're getting from them. But at the end of the day, it's not their family, and life is going on. I still see my neighbors putting out their Halloween decorations, and it's just, I'm almost thinking to myself, how can you be busy putting up these ridiculous inflatable skeletons and stuff and spiders when there's war going on and there's hostages being held? But again, it's no fault of their own. It's just not family for them. If it's not family, they're going about life as normal. And it's important for us to remember it's not normal. He says, I think we all feel we want to be able to do something, but it's difficult. It's hard. We've been through in our lifetime. We struggle to find the right attitude. Once again, we struggle to find the focus, the right attitude, that a focus to see Klal Yisrael instead of our own lives. Again, most of the things we're going to do today and tomorrow are things that focus on our individual lives, to be able to have the godless, the greatness, the focusing on Klal Yisrael, on the people, rather than ourselves, is something very difficult, especially because we're at a loss to know what to do. I want to do tonight, in seeing Sakanas of Yisrael, seeing all the danger Jewish people are in, is to go back to Reb Chaim Shmulevitz's shmuzin during the 1973 war, during the period of the Yom Kippur War. Just to remind ourselves who Reb Chaim Shmulevitz was, I didn't put on a bio here, but Reb Chaim Shmulevitz was one of the great European Rashi Yeshiva. He headed the Mir Yeshiva in Poland, and the Mir Yeshiva in Poland was the only Lithuanian yeshiva to make it completely intact out of the inferno of the Holocaust. Absolutely incredible story of the Yad Hashem, God's hand guiding it every step of the way, how they made it across Russia and then into China, then into Japan, and where they ended up spending out the warriors in Shanghai. It just absolutely incredible story. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz was with them every step of the way, and after the war, he took the yeshiva to Israel, where he reestablished it in Jerusalem, and it continues to grow. It's one of the largest yeshivas in the world now, the Mir Yeshiva. But during that time, in 1973, it was a much, much smaller place than anything that we visited or may have studied in today. And he gave a number. He has a sefer called the Sichos Musar. Aside from being an incredible Talmud Chacham, he also was a great Baal Musar. He was a master of ethical teachings and ethical behavior and ethical learnings. And he tried, in the spirit of the Musar yeshivas, he tried to instill this to all of his Talmidim. And there's a sefer that's out there. I have it at home. It's a blue cover. It's called Sichos Musar. Talmidim recorded 3 years. They wrote down, transcribed 3 years worth of the Musar talks that he gave. The copy I have at home does not have what we're going to see tonight, but a later edition has it. So let's see what he writes here. These shmuzin were not printed in the original Sichos Musar. That's what he's saying. What we're going to be seeing today, this is not in the original version, what I have at home. However, an additional Sichos Musar that has a section in the back, there was a newer edition that came out. They had this at the school. And what you're going to see today, the snippets that I'm going to share, is because I was able to scan some of it last night at the school. Note, it has notes from 6 or 7 shmuz and discourses that he gave that were given during the 73 war. It's hard to get ourselves motivated to know what to do, but Reb Chaim Shmulevitz was gifted in this. So what Rabbi Reisman wanted to do in 2009 was take out what was Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz in the Mir Yeshiva in Yerushalayim. What was he advising people during the 1973 Yom Kippur War? Now, again, we just hit the 50th anniversary of that terrible episode in Jewish history. Yom Kippur this year was the 50th anniversary. And in fact, the secular date was October 6th. Our enemies, the terrorists who struck Israel on Shmini Atzeres, they absolutely knew this, and they understood that the anniversary was October 6th. They struck on October 7th. They didn't miss it by a day. They absolutely wanted to hit Bnei Israel during Chag. They wanted to hit when people would be most vulnerable and least suspecting. So this was their way of saying happy anniversary, but they didn't miss it. They absolutely knew they were a day late, but they wanted to get on the Chag where they can catch people as vulnerable as possible, the animals that they are. So let's take a look at some points that Rav Chaim Shmulevitz said. Now, again, remember, the 1973 Yom Kippur War starts on Yom Kippur. It goes on for a few weeks. So he's delivering these talks that we're about to see snippets from. I believe it was already during Sukkot. When I saw on the remember, Sukkot is on the heels of Yom Kippur, just a few days later. So he was talking to his yeshiva, giving a number of discourses about ideas that he felt were important to share while Klal Yisrael was at war. This is days after the 73 Yom Kippur War began, in which Israel suffered a staggering amount of losses at the beginning until they were able to turn the tide. So just to show you in the Sefer, what you have on the bottom of page 1, it's called Sichos Musar, and this section is called L'Regel HaMatzav, which basically means in light of the situation. A matzav means a situation. And the footnote on the bottom says, Kavutzas Ma'amarim, this collection of speeches, V'divrei Torah, and these words of inspiration, Shenemru al Yidei Maran Zatzal, that were said by our teacher, meaning Rabbi Shmulevitz, B'tkufas Mochames Yom HaKippurim. It was during the period of the Yom Kippur War, V'natku mitoch rishimos sherashman la'atzmo. And he says, we put these together based on the notes that Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz made for himself, that I guess he must have, I don't know if they were index cards or papers. He had put notes together, and he says, we wrote these based on his notes. They somehow got his original notes. Nirfas b'sefer hazikaron Maran Zatzal. They were originally printed in a memorial volume that was put together in memory of our teacher, Rabbi Shmulevitz. Hotzas Moriah was put out by the Moriah Publishing Press in Tufshim in 1980. So this is when they reprinted the Sichos Musar. That's when they found these notes and they put them together. That's why they put them in here. So Rabbi Reisman is going to share with us 4 points from Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz's talk. So let's see. Top of page 2. I want to take 4 of the nekudos, 4 of the points that he mentioned during that period of great danger to Klal Yisrael. And I would like to use them myself to help me focus in the coming days on proper davening, on proper focus in general, on the nitzrachim of Klal Yisrael, those who are in need, especially in Eretz Yisrael and Israel. In the first shmuz, in the first discourse, he mentions what is called a hakdama, introduction, something we should bear in mind always. The Gemara in Bava Basra, Daf Yud Amud Beis, 10b, mentions 2 individuals, and they're referred to as the Haruge Lud, those who were killed in Lud. And the Gemara explains Rashi there too. The Haruge Lud were people who lived in a community that was called Lud, which was accused of killing the son or daughter, child of the king, who was the Roman governor of the region. This is during the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, when the Romans were in charge, and this community was in danger, meaning the king was furious, and he said he was absolutely sure that someone in that community was responsible for killing his kids, and he threatened that unless you turn over the killers of my child, I am going to destroy this entire Jewish community of Lud, every man, woman, and child who's there, unless you hand over the killers. So it says here, continuing from Rabbi Reisman, the community was in danger now. The Jewish community, the king was furious and was convinced someone in the community had killed his child. The entire community was in danger. These 2 individuals who are known as the Haruge Lud, they came forward, and although it was not true, they said they were the ones who did it. And the king's fury was taken out on them. They were tortured to death. The community was saved. So these 2 people, I believe the Gemara says they were brothers, stepped forward, and they basically said, we'll take the hit for the team. They said, we're dead anyhow, because it was an absolute lie. It was no one from Lud who was responsible for killing the king or this Roman governor's child. However, the king was convinced it was. He was ready to slaughter the whole town. So they said, we're dead anyhow. We may as well offer ourselves and take a hit for the team, and that way we'll save everyone else. That was the decision that these two made, and I believe they were brothers. They were called the Haruge Lud, those who were killed by Lud, and they were killed, but the rest of the community was saved. So next paragraph, the Gemara says the Haruge Lud, where the Haruge Lud are in Olam Emes, meaning up in Olam Haba, Chazal say those neshamas of those two brothers, the Haruge Lud, where they are, Ein Kol Beria Yachol Amod. It's a very special place. No other neshama could stand in their presence. They have their own, call it their box seats, their own luxury suite in Olam Haba. No other neshamas are near them. Why? Because they were Moser Nefesh. They sacrificed themselves for the klal, for the community. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz writes, after quoting this Gemara, he tells his Talmidim, this is the way we should think about the soldiers who are fighting. Picture the concept of Haruge Lud and the obligation for us. You talk about the Haruge Lud, it's an image, a picture of bravery, of caring about the tzibur. That's the image we should have. The picture should rip us up inside. It should throw us into tremendous desire to do whatever little we can to be helpful in Shemaim, to feel the tsar is far away. I want to show you the actual words of Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz. That's what I have for the next paragraph. He says, at the end of this discourse, this is in his notes, at the end of the discourse, Amarnu, we said, meaning I said the following, Shnei Yisodos Elam. I said two final points, and these are them. Here's the first point, the one that has to do with Haruge Lud. Ma'amarim Zal, what Chazal tells him, Baba Basra, Yudam Beis, the Haruge Lud, those two brothers, those two people who were killed in Lud, they sacrificed themselves for the whole city. Ein Kol Beria Yachol Lamod b'Mechitzasan. Nobody, no other neshamas could stand in their presence, because of what they did. V'mishum, why? Mishum shemasr nafsham b'ad Yisrael. They were willing to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the klal, for the sake of the Jewish people. V'chazeh ani omer, and this is what I say. Rabbi Shmulevitz says, Al ela shemosrim nafsham, on those who are willing to put their lives on the line, avur hatzala seinu, in order to save us, to save Am Yisrael. Meaning he's writing this in 1973, he's saying this to students in 1973 during the Yom Kippur War. She'ein kol ha'olam yachol lamod b'mechitasam. Nobody could stand in their presence. They're on an extra elevated level because they're willing to stand up and they're putting their lives on the line to defend Am Yisrael. They are the modern day Haruge Lud, what they're willing to do. So our responsibility to double down in prayer and do whatever we can to daven for their well-being. Who believe gvul, it has no limits. Sharei rak avur posech pesach lechaveru amru. The Gemara tells us, Chazal tells us in the Medrash, that if someone does something so little, they just hold the door open for us. They open the door for us. Chazal say, nafsho chayav lo. My soul owes that person. I'm indebted to that person. Wow, he held the door open for me. If I'm indebted for a person for holding the door open for me, Kal v'chomer, how much more so, for someone who's willing to sacrifice himself for our sakes. There is no limit to the responsibility and to the degree of appreciation we have, the indebtedness we have, and our responsibility to do whatever we can to help them, to benefit them with prayer, with tefillah, whatever we can do to help. Our debt of gratitude should be off the charts. That's a very, very powerful statement. What he's saying is they are the modern day Haruge Lud. Unbelievable. Yesterday, Rabbi Grunwald, we had an assembly in the school for the elementary school and then the high school to speak to the students about the current situation and to say some Tehillim with them. And Rabbi Grunwald spoke and he said something amazing. I didn't know this. He said that when the terror was unfolding on Shabbos morning, when this all started, it took hours for the army and the security forces to be able to spring into action and to get to all the places where they were needed because there was such an onslaught. There were so many terrorists, just overwhelmed so many areas. And one of the communities, I don't know if it was a kibbutz or one of the yeshuvim, one of those small communities down south that was under attack from the terrorists. So Rabbi Grunwald says he had a friend from yeshiva, and this fellow, he and about two other people, they had some weapons, they were armed, and they also had an armored van. They had a vehicle that was, I guess, a bulletproof vehicle. It was armored van. And they just decided we can't stay where they were. I don't know where they were, but he says, when we hear what's going on in the south, maybe there's people that will be able to help. He said they jumped in their van with some weapons. there was no military escort, but he said they had they had military training, they had military backgrounds, they had some weapons, and they were in their armored van, and they drove to one of these communities, just said, what could we do to help? Those are the Harugei Lud. This is what they were putting themselves on the line. And he says they went into some of the houses, and Nebuch, they got to some of those houses too late. Families were slaughtered, but others they were able to help. There was some wounded, injured. They were able to get them out. They were able to put them into the armored van. And he said, unfortunately, one of the houses they got into, there were still some terrorists in there, and they got into a gunfight with them. One of his friends was wounded, and he says another one was unfortunately killed. But how did he die? This is modern day Harugei Lud. They were being Moser Nefesh. They were trying to do what they could to save other Jews. This is what Reb Chaim Shmulevitz was talking about 50 years ago. And unfortunately, we're seeing itself repeat itself now. And just like Chazal said about those Harugei Lud, that aim Kol Beria Yechola Lamod b'Mechitza Son. No creature, no neshama could stand in their presence of someone who's Moser Nefesh for the Jewish people, for others. Same too. There's unfortunately in this past week, there's been so many more Harugei Lud, people who have given their lives trying to protect others, and they're at a much more elevated level than what we could achieve. Just getting back to Rabbi Reisman, he says after that Hebrew paragraph, we have a friend who told us that her sister's son was called up to the army, and he can't tell where he is, and they don't know where he is. And suddenly, when it's an individual that we know, that we had a connection to, we felt it more. And that feeling, that image of the Harugei Lud will hopefully bring us a certain awakening, a hisorus, a feeling of a spiritual awakening, might get us to daven harder. That was his first point. He wants to bring out a second point from Rabbi Shmulevitz now. I'm going to scroll down here. Sorry, it says the second. Here's the second point he wanted to bring out that Rabbi Shmulevitz was emphasizing in 1973 during the Yom Kippur War. The second, a very powerful image from those shmuzim is the image of Eov. Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz writes very strongly, what happened to Eov? We know that Eov suffered a terrible afflictions. And he quotes, we're going to see soon, we'll see it inside, there's a famous Medrash in Gemara that says that Eov had some other people that he knew. Paro said, come, let's plot to put Klal Yisrael in danger. And he called in a number of advisors. So the Gemara and the Medrash says, who are those advisors? One of them was Eov, one of them was Bilam, and one of them was Yisro. So the Gemara, the Medrash says that Eov was quiet. So his punishment was Yisurim, terrible afflictions. Yisro, in protest, ran away. And Bilam was the one who gave the advice to enslave them and do all sorts of terrible things to them. So he ends up dying by the sword. That's what the Medrash tells us. So Rabbi Shmulevitz wanted to focus on Eov. What happened to Eov? Paro said, come, let's plot to put Klal Yisrael in danger. Eov was quiet. He didn't object. Klal Yisrael is in danger and Eov is quiet. Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz points out that had he spoken, it wouldn't have helped. Yisro spoke up and it didn't help. Yisro had to run away. So what good would it have done Eov to speak up? Had Eov spoken up, it wouldn't have helped anything. So why does Hashem punish him to give him Yisurim? He didn't speak up because he saw it wasn't going to do anything. Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz says to us to be quiet, to be inactive, to not put effort during that time of tzara. The Bali Musar, those ethical masters say that on the kasha that Eov was, we're now moving to page 3, quiet and is punished. But even if he had said something, it would not help anyhow. They say even if it doesn't help, if someone's in pain, you scream, you raise your voice. And if he was in pain, he would have raised his voice. Let's say, God forbid, someone's building the sukkah, they hit their finger with a hammer. Screaming's not going to make it feel better, but we're hurting, so we scream. That's what we do. That's what a human being does. If we're really feeling pain, we scream. So that's what we have to do. If we're really feeling pain, we have to scream. We have to call out to Hashem in prayer. So let's see. Here I just have a scan from what Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz, how he actually wrote this in the Hebrew, how he said it over. V'raya me'Eov. Look at the proof from Eov. Shenidon b'Yisurim. Up in Shemayim, they said he was deserving of terrible afflictions. Yisura Eov. They were so bad, they're always referred to as the afflictions of Eov. Why? Mipnei sheshasak, because he was quiet. V'hava nischak malo, that when Paro said, come, let's come up with a plan about how we're going to afflict the Jewish people. If he had protested, it wouldn't have helped. How do I know it wouldn't have helped? Raya me Yisro. Look at Yisro. Shalomicha elabarach. What did Yisro do? He had to run away. So protesting wouldn't have helped. That's why Yisro ran. Avaliyav Shalo Barak, he didn't run away. V'lomicha, he didn't protest. It seems to indicate it must not have bothered him. If it would have bothered him, he would have taken the Yisro path, which was to run. If it would have bothered him, he would have screamed out and called out and protested, but he didn't. It must not have bothered him. Nidon be Yisurim. For someone to just sit by quietly when Klal Yisrael is suffering, then that's terrible. Yisuri, that's why Hashem judged him so harshly. Mida keneged mida. This is measure for measure. Laharos lo, to show him Sha'koev, that if someone is in pain, soek. When someone's in pain, they cry out. Even though they know that the scream is not going to help, it's not going to reduce the pain. So that's what happened to you. He was taught that lesson. What do you do when you're in pain? You scream out, even if it can't help. So he says, so certainly when we're talking about the entire community calling out with Tehillim and calling out to Hashem, of course that's going to help when you have an entire community get together to do that, like we just did the other night and communities around the world are doing. And there's an incredible obligation on each of us. So back to Rabbi Reisman. So we have the image of the Haruge Lud. He says, so far from Rabbi Shmulevitz, we have that idea of how to view the Chayalei Tzahal as the Haruge Lud. They're being Moser Nefesh. That's how awesome they are. We also have the image of Eov, that we can't just be passive. We can't be inactive. We have to call out. We have to scream when we know Bnei Yisrael's in pain. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz give us another image. Here's the third point. He says, Chushim, the son of Dan. We're told in the Gemara, you don't see this in the Chumash, but we're told in the Gemara and in the Medrash that Chushim ben Dan, he killed Esav. He lopped off his head with a sword. It's in this coming week's Parshas Vayechi. Chushim says Naphtali was sent back. This is talking about when they come to bury Yaakov in the Maras HaMachpelah. So in Parshas Vayechi, so the Medrash tells us that Esav stops them and says, "Where's the deed? I want to see that he has that he's got the deed to be buried there. How do you know it doesn't go to me?" And they say, "Oops, we left that in Egypt." So he says, "I'm not letting you pass until you show me the deed." So they send Naphtali, who's the quickest of them all, to go back to Egypt to get the deed, the contract, which gave his father the rights to be buried in Maras HaMachpelah. So Chushim is kind of confused, saying, "What's the delay?" Everyone sees the delay, but Chushim was deaf. So Chushim's saying, "What's the delay?" So they either have to use sign language or write it out for him to tell Chushim what's going on. Why are we delayed? And Chushim is shocked. He says, "Yaakov should lay b'bizayon. He should wait in disgrace, waiting to be buried." So he just jumped up with his sword and he kills Esav. He says, "This is ridiculous. Why are you causing our father Yaakov, grandfather in his case, grandfather Yaakov, to be laying in shame?" He jumps up and kills Esav. So why didn't Yehuda kill Esav? Yehuda was stronger than Chushim. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz said because Yehuda got accustomed to the situation a little at a time. Esav was there. Perhaps he thought Esav was coming to accompany Yaakov to Yaakov's burial. He got accustomed to the situation to Yehuda, so Yehuda could live with it. Chushim had no idea what was going on around him. He was deaf. He couldn't understand. Suddenly he sees his father, merely his grandfather, is not being buried. They're talking and talking, and then they sit down, and Naphtali goes running away, and then they tell him what's happening. He was struck with horror because of Esav. That's why Yaakov can't get buried. They'll sit on their hands, and bang, he cut off Esav's head. He had the feeling, the shock, the horror of what was taking place. In other words, he didn't become complacent. When it's fresh, he reacted the way he did. Let's look at the way Rav Chaim Shmulevitz says it. We can learn something important from Chushim, the son of Dan. When they finally explained to him Yaakov, that Esav is preventing them from burying Yaakov until Naphtali gets all the way back from Egypt. Amar, he says, until Uncle Naphtali returns, grandfather Zayd is going to be laying here in shame. Natal Kupa, he took out his sword, Machia Resha Katle, and he lops off Esav's head and kills him. That's the Gemara in Sota. It's Sarach Lavin, we have to understand. Hechi Taken, how can it be explained? Shebnei Yaakov Yachlu Lispol Matzah Kazeh. How can it be that Yaakov's own children were not as outraged as Chushim? Chushim is a grandson, and he's so outraged that he gets up and strikes down Esav. How can it be Yaakov's own children, especially Yehuda's a warrior? Why wasn't he outraged? Why were they not outraged by the fact their father's laying in shame? Chushim ben Dan, Nechto Shel Yaakov, it took a grandson. He's the only one who says, I can't be okay with this situation. Here's how I explain it. The Bnei Yaakov Nasu v'Nasnu Esav. They already got into a back and forth conversation with Esav. Visavru, and they started to think, Kol Ragashi Natschuoso Ad Shianiach Likvoras Yaakov Vian. Once they're talking to him, they become a little bit dulled to the situation because they're saying, okay, we'll eventually win this argument. They're dulled to it, and in the meantime, their father is waiting to be buried. When we talk kach nisraglu ma'at l'matzav, they ended up becoming a little bit more desensitized, used to the situation, until finally they were able to tolerate it. Lokin chushim bandan, but that wasn't the same for him. Shaya kaved shmiya, he was unable to hear. Chushim bandan was deaf. He never was part of the conversations. He had no idea what was going on. When he finally finds out at the second that he learned that his grandfather is laying in shame until Uncle Naphtali gets all the way back from Egypt, he says, I can't bear such a situation. He says, that's what's going on with us. This is the middle of Sukkot. He says, a week's gone by. Time has passed from when this all began on Yom Kippur until now in the middle of Sukkot. We've gotten used to this idea that we're at war. It's a terrible war. So we've kind of made peace with it. We thought about, okay, how am I going to get through this day, the next day? It's not affecting us in the horrible nature of it the same way as it did on day one. Day one, it affected us horribly because it ripped us out of our comfort zone, where we were in life, to where we are now. Day one shook us to the very core. Now we've gotten somewhat used to it, so our tefillas, he's saying, might not be as strong. We have to wake ourselves up, and we have to recognize what's going on. We're becoming dulled to it. Every day that goes on, we're becoming used to, like, this has become like the normal situation. It's not normal. It's not normal for Bnei Yisrael to be at war. It's not normal for children to be off of school when they should be back. It's not normal to have to be running to bomb shelters all the time when rockets are going off. It's not normal for so many husbands, brothers, sons to be away now on reserve duty. It's not normal for young men who had just gotten married in the months ago. My niece's husband, she just got married. We were at their wedding this summer. He's now called up to reserve duty. Just a couple of months of a newlywed. For someone to be torn away from their wife like that, that's not normal. But every day that goes on, we get used to this idea. We shouldn't. We need to find some way to remain just as shocked and just as outraged as we were when this all began. And that's what he's saying here. And then, but look where Rabbi Reisman goes on about this now. I thought this is fascinating. Look at page 4. He offered some words of Musar. He says, we've gotten accustomed to a lot of things that we don't adequately appreciate. I don't mean only the idea of Jewish boys sitting in a tank in the danger, God forbid, of it turning into an incinerator that they can't get out, but the whole idea of Israel. We've grown up knowing we can go to Eretz Yisrael, that there are Jews there. We have a rule, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Osa Tov, God does good to the one who is makir, to the one who appreciates it. If we want Israel, you have to appreciate it. If we don't appreciate Israel, it's in danger. And all of us in Galus have gotten too accustomed to the tremendous bracha of Yisrael, of Israel. The Gedolim of 100 years ago never dreamed there would be millions of Jews in Israel. No one had in wildest dreams this would be going on, but we've gotten so used to it, we don't seem to appreciate it. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kindness, it's here. It is true that most Israelis are not from. What's an irreligious Jew in America is disappearing. He barely knows he's Jewish. He's assimilating. In Israel, even if they're not religious, they know they're Jews. They marry Jews. They know Hebrew. They know Mashiach will come. Mashiach will have to set up yeshivas and teach millions of Jews to learn, but at least they'll know Lashon Kodesh. They know Hebrew. But from where are they going to learn in America? They have to start with Aleph Beis. In Israel, at least they know the language. The blessing of yeshivas and from Jews in Israel is great. Perhaps that non-religious Jews are there is a greater blessing for the tzibur of Klal Yisrael. We've gotten used to it. We appreciate it too little. Vacations that are elsewhere are mind-boggling. If your grandparents heard you were planning a vacation to somewhere besides Israel, or vacation to Eretz Yisrael, you would not dream you would question it. Jews going to Pesach in the Swiss Alps is a joke, that it's a choice. To go anywhere but Eretz HaKadosha, why choose that over this? It's a lack of appreciation of what we have. We have to be more of a chushin. If we appreciated Eretz Yisrael more, it would be dearer to us. It would mean more to us. The problems would touch us more strongly. Picture the Haruge Lud, Eov, that stayed quiet, Hushim ben Dun in his feelings, and try to emulate that. So there's 3 powerful points so far. We're going to get one more. We'll try to, I don't know if we'll have time to do it all inside, but we'll try to get through this. This last one's a very important one, because sometimes we're so busy with tefillah, we're busy with prayer, and we think, Well, how effective, how important is it? Look at this proof now. This is incredible. The fourth figure is Esther Amalka, our holy Queen Esther, who tells Mordechai, have the Jewish people fast for 3 days and nights consecutively, because I will go make an attempt to save Klal Yisrael. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz makes an incredible halachic point from Rambam, 8th parak of Yuma, that it's usher to be mechalal Shabbos for any mitzvah, or any mitzvah for segula, for something that works in a supernatural way. It's only okay to be mechalal Shabbos to save someone in the derech hateva, in a natural way. Meaning what? I'm allowed to be mechalal Shabbos as a physician, as an emergency room technician, if I'm going to use medical technology to save someone. I can't be mechalal Shabbos to now go use some unproven segula. I don't know, get some amulet out of somewhere. I can't be mechalal Shabbos for that. But I'm only allowed to be mechalal Shabbos for something which is a proven medicinal remedy. So look what he says now. That's clear halacha. So look what he says now. To fast for 72 hours for 3 days that Esther was asking, that means they didn't eat matzah. It was Pesach time. It was the first days of Pesach. That means they violated 2 laws. They were fasting on Yom Tov, and it also means they didn't celebrate Yom Tov. They didn't have matzah. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz says the koach of a prayer on the day of fasting is a natural Yeshua in this world. Meaning Esther was saying to them, but by fasting, you'll be able to daven stronger, daven more, your tefillas will be more potent. That's a proven segula. If the halach is, I'm only allowed to break halach, be mechal Shabbos, mechal Yom Tov, to save a life, if it's a proven work, then that means what Esther was saying, that tefillah, the more potent, the more powerful we can make that tefillah by accompanying fasting, that means it's not just some amulet, it's a proven segula. So if we can find ways to make our tefillahs more effective, that is a proven segula. That's such an awesome point. We'll switch in the Hebrew. Natural issue in the world is a cry for help to that degree is something we can be awakened to. Sorry, let me scroll down this here. Our generation is not a generation that grows in ruchnius from fasting, the way perhaps they once did. But remember, not everyone fasted 72 hours in the time of Esther. For those for whom it was a danger, they did what they could. In a time of tzara, we should do something according to our ability. Should try to deny ourselves some type of a pleasure, something meaningful for the duration of war, to limit yourself, limit your entertainment or sports or pleasures in this world. Let's look at what Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, how he said this about Esther. This is very powerful. Esther Amra la Mordechai. Esther said to Mordechai, Lech kenosis kol Yehudim, gather all the Jews, v'tzumu alai, fast for me, v'al tochlu v'al tishtu shloshes yamim laila v'yom. Fast, do not eat or drink for 3 days and 3 nights. Hareza tanis tzibur. That means she was calling a public fast, gimel yamim laila v'yom, 3 consecutive days. V'doche yom tov. She was pushing off yom tov b'achilas matzah, because it was the beginning of Pesach when all that palace intrigue took place. So how did she have a heter to do that? She's telling them to break halacha. I understand if you're saying break halacha because you need to drive someone to the hospital. Break Shabbos because you need to use the defibrillator. Those are all proven ways to help. How is this what you're asking people to fast and break halacha? Al korchach, what must you say? Shazu eitza b'derech hateva. Trying to set up a scenario where people can have more powerful prayers. You're trying to say, use the power of tefillah. Means the power of tefillah is b'derech hateva. That is part of the natural world. Otherwise, it never would have pushed off the mitzvah of matzah. And he says, look in. He tells you where to look in Maseches Yoma, where you'll find something there. That's something beautiful. All right, there's more here to the Rabbi Reisman transcript, and I encourage everyone. You have it on screen. We have some here in the show too. You can take some of this, but let's just look at the end. I want to let's look at something very interesting I thought at the end. Here, look at this. The last 3 paragraphs on page 5. It's a tremendous difficulty for Klal Yisrael. It's our hope and prayer not only that the Yeshua salvation will come quickly, but that we'll have kavana in our davening. That sim shalom, when we ask God to bring peace, will mean something in our Shemona Esrei tomorrow. Re'ena v'yanyenu, we're asking God to see us in our affliction. I've mentioned numerous times that is the bracha in which to add a bakasha, to add a request to be saved from a tzara in the midst of gullus. Take your siddur, insert a little piece of paper, so that even if you daydream, it should wake you up when you get to that bracha. Put a post-it note. Insert the words before Baruch Atah at the end of the 7th bracha Shemona Esrei, the bracha of Re'ena v'yanyenu. Before he says, here's something he would insert. Ana Kadosh Baruch Hu, oh please God, Hagain al Achenu b'nei Yisrael, Shemeretz Yisrael, protect our brothers, the Jewish brothers and sisters living in Israel, ubefrat specifically Ba'aza, that are living near Gaza, ubedarom Eretz Yisrael, in the southern part of Israel. He says, stick that into our Shemona Esrei, make it real. Please, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, protect our brothers, the children of Israel, and particularly in Gaza, in the south of Eretz Yisrael. Add those words, preferably in Hebrew. It can be in any language if you're davening b'tzibur, if you're davening with a congregation. This experience will pass. The Yeshua salvation will come. There's confidence. Let's hope that we'll grow from it. Achenu b'nei Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael will grow from it. Should be a good vach for all of us and for Eretz Yisrael. I thought this was very important on many different ways. And again, I think just bringing us back to those ideas that Reb Chaim Shmulevitz was sharing 50 years ago during the Yom Kippur War. And there's so many more ideas. These are just 4 ideas that struck Rabbi Reisman, and he wanted to share with his community 14 years ago. And just the fact that here it was, he's speaking to his community 14 years ago, as I started with, just reminds us that this is not a new problem, and this isn't a problem that we could just keep kicking the can down the road. And Hashem should give the leaders of Israel the wisdom to handle the situation in the most appropriate manner possible, and in the way that'll save the most Jewish lives and bring about the greatest sense of security, peace, and normalcy for all of our brothers and sisters. I know I join with all of you, and I say that we should hear good news soon. Hashem should keep looking after Bnei Yisrael. He should bring nechama, a sense of comfort to those families who are reeling in pain from having lost loved ones, and should bring home safely all those who have been taken captive, and bring true peace and sense of security and peace of mind to all of our brothers and sisters in Israel. I'm going to stop the record now, and if any